My father passed away on a Wednesday at 4:17 in the afternoon. By 8:30 that same evening, the woman who had shared more than 20 years of his life had already made it clear that I had no place in that house. She didn't even wait for the funeral. When I came downstairs carrying a small travel bag, she was already standing at the front door. Pack whatever belongs to you and leave. This house is mine now. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply looked at her for a few seconds. There was something she had no idea about, and that detail was about to change everything. I picked up my bag, walked through the entryway, and left without looking back. As I made my way to my car, I felt the weight of a set of keys inside my coat pocket. They weren't the keys to that house. They were the keys to a place Linda had never heard of. And for now, it was better to keep it that way. A week earlier, everything still seemed to follow the same familiar routine. Every Wednesday, I drove nearly 40 minutes to have dinner with my father. Linda would prepare the same beef stew she made every week, and the table was always set for 3. Strangely, my plate was never among them. I would open the cabinet, take out a clean plate, and set it in the corner myself, just as I had been doing for years. I had long stopped wondering why. My father looked up when I walked in. He appeared much thinner than before. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to hold his fork. Linda kept insisting he was simply tired. I knew it was something far more serious. I had reviewed his medical reports a few days before. His heart was failing. Halfway through dinner, my father set down his utensils. "Did you manage to sort out the issue with the building?" I noticed Linda turn her head toward him before I could respond. "Douglas, let's not talk about work at the dinner table." My father went quiet. So did I. But that single word, building, kept circling through my thoughts for the rest of the evening. After dinner, I washed the dishes as usual. While drying one of the glasses, I spotted an envelope from a law office sitting on the counter. It was addressed to my father. Before I could read the return address, Linda snatched it up and slipped it inside a drawer. "Just junk mail," she smiled, but that smile didn't convince me. I left a few minutes later. As I drove along the highway, I was overcome by a feeling I couldn't quite name, as though that dinner had been a farewell. And without knowing it yet, it had been the last time I would ever see my father alive. The hospital called exactly 7 days later. They didn't need to say much. The moment I heard the tone in the nurse's voice, I understood that something had changed forever. My father had suffered another cardiac arrest. By the time I arrived, it was already too late. I stood beside his bed for a few minutes, staring at the darkened monitor and the room that suddenly felt far too quiet. I didn't cry yet. I just recalled our Saturday mornings together, driving through the city talking about properties, investments, and numbers as though it were a private language only the two of us spoke. He had never been a man of grand speeches. He showed his love by teaching me how to build a future, and now I would have to carry that future on my own. I returned to the house that same night. Neighbors came and went with flowers and food. Everything felt like a funeral before the funeral. I went upstairs to the room where I had slept as a child, or rather, what used to be my room. Linda had converted it into a yoga space years ago. Not a single trace remained of the girl who had once lived there. I set my bag on the floor. I hadn't even managed to sit down when Linda appeared in the doorway. "You can't stay here." Her voice was calm, far too calm. "Your father is gone. It's time for you to move on with your life." I looked at her for a moment, expecting some kind of explanation, maybe even a conversation, but she had already made up her mind. I went back downstairs with the same bag I had arrived with. Cora was standing motionless in the hallway. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. In the end, she said nothing at all. I walked out without a word. As the door closed behind me, I understood that I was leaving behind far more than an address. I drove to a small motel on the edge of town. The room was bare and simple: a bed, an old lamp, and a window that offered barely a glimpse of the road outside. It was enough. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's question from dinner echoing back to me. Did you manage to sort out the issue with the building? Why had he wanted to bring that up on that particular evening? And why had Linda changed the subject so quickly? The following morning, I decided to call the one person who had always been completely honest with me, my Aunt Maggie. She picked up on the second ring. She didn't even say hello. "Paige, there are things your father arranged a very long time ago." I frowned. "What do you mean?" There were a few seconds of silence on the other end of the line. Then she spoke with a calm that sent a chill through my entire body. "You'll understand soon enough, but first you need to come with me to the attorney's office. There's something Linda still doesn't know. I didn't sleep the night before the appointment." Maggie's words kept running through my mind. There's something Linda still doesn't know. On the drive to the attorney's office, I tried to imagine what she meant. I thought about paperwork, bank accounts, maybe a life insurance policy. I never imagined the truth would be so much larger. The office occupied the second floor of an older building in the city center. Maggie was already waiting for me. She held a folder in her hands but looked anything but nervous. She seemed composed, as if she had been waiting for this day for years. "Your father wanted this to happen at exactly the right moment," she told me as we walked in. Before I could ask another question, the attorney appeared to greet us. He was a calm man with completely silver hair and an unhurried voice. He led us into a conference room where several folders sat perfectly arranged on the table. I had the feeling that each one held a piece of a story I had never been told. "Douglas was a very thoughtful man," the attorney began. "He knew how to plan every detail of his life." I nodded quietly. That sounded exactly like my father. Then he opened the first folder. Over the course of many years, he carried out a series of entirely lawful transfers. I frowned. "Transfers?" The attorney offered a slight smile. "Yes, but these were not made after his illness began. They started long before." My heart began to beat faster. Maggie looked down. She seemed moved. The attorney slid a document across the table toward me. I recognized my father's signature immediately. I also recognized something else. My name. Several more pages revealed the same information. My name appeared again and again. I couldn't make sense of any of it. "What does all of this mean?" I asked. The attorney took a slow breath. "It means your father spent many years preparing your future." A lump formed in my throat, not because of the money, but because even when he seemed to be silent, he had never stopped looking after me. Before I could finish reviewing the documents, Maggie's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted entirely. She answered immediately and said only 2 words. "I understand. Thank you." She hung up slowly, then looked at me. "Linda just moved up her meeting with the attorney. Why? Because she found something she can't explain." Silence settled over the room. The attorney closed the folders with quiet composure. "That means the moment has come." "The moment for what?" I asked. He held my gaze for a few seconds, then answered with complete calm. "For everyone to find out who the true owner is of everything they have been searching for all along. And for the first time since my father's death, I felt the story was about to take a turn that no one in that family had seen coming." The room was silent when everyone took their seats. Linda arrived first, dressed in black, carrying the same confidence she had displayed since the funeral. She sat at the head of the table without so much as glancing at me. Cora sat beside her, visibly uneasy. Maggie settled in next to me. The attorney waited a few moments before speaking. A thick file rested on the table, and I knew that once it was opened, nothing would ever be the same. "Thank you all for coming," he said evenly. "Today we will be reviewing the last will and testament of Douglas Irving." Linda nodded with assurance. She looked entirely convinced she already knew the outcome. The attorney began with the assets that formed part of the official estate, the house, the savings, several personal accounts. Linda exhaled with relief, but that relief was short-lived. The attorney lifted another folder. "However, there is one matter that falls outside this inheritance." Linda's brow creased. "What do you mean?" "Over many years, Mr. Irving legally transferred a number of assets during his lifetime." The atmosphere in the room shifted completely. No one spoke. The attorney turned the folder slowly toward my side of the table. "The beneficiary of those transfers is Paige Irving." Linda let out a strained laugh. "That makes no sense." The attorney continued without pause. Among those assets is a commercial building, several financial investments, and additional properties acquired legally over the years. Linda stopped smiling. For the first time, she looked genuinely confused. How much are we talking about? The attorney opened the final document and studied the page for a moment before replying. The approximate value exceeds $28 million. The silence that followed was absolute. Cora's eyes went wide, and she made no attempt to hide her shock. Maggie simply lowered her head. She had already known the truth. Linda shot to her feet. That is impossible. Everything is supported by property deeds, notarized records, and official documentation, the attorney replied without changing his tone. The transfers began many years ago and were carried out entirely at Mr. Irving's discretion. Linda looked straight at me as if she expected me to deny it all. I didn't. I stayed quiet because there was nothing left to explain. The documents spoke for themselves. When it seemed the meeting was drawing to a close, my attorney placed another file on the table. There is still one outstanding matter. Linda slowly sat back down. What matter? My attorney opened the folder. Following Douglas's passing, a significant sum of money was withdrawn using a power of attorney that had already expired. Linda's expression changed. For the first time since she had walked into that office, she began to understand that the real problem was no longer the inheritance. It was everything she had done believing no one would ever find out. Linda's attorney spent the following week searching for any possible flaw, reviewing every document, every transfer, every signature, every date. A week later, he delivered the only conclusion he could reach. There is no legal basis to contest any of this. Everything was handled correctly over many years. Linda said nothing. For the first time, she understood that Douglas had never left my future to chance. He had simply acted long before she ever imagined he would. Days later, the money she had withdrawn irregularly was returned to the estate account. Her own attorney advised her to return it before the consequences grew far worse. She didn't argue. She simply signed the check. Shortly afterward, I received a message from Cora. I never knew what my mother was planning to do that night. I'm sorry. I read those words several times. I didn't reply, not out of bitterness, but because some wounds need silence before they need conversation. In the months that followed, my life moved forward. I opened my own financial consulting firm and named it Irving Compliance Group. It wasn't a sentimental tribute. It was a way of honoring where everything I knew had come from. Aunt Maggie began visiting once a month. She always brought freshly baked bread and a new story about my father. One afternoon, she pulled a small, worn calculator from a drawer. It was the same one he had given me when I was 16. The plastic casing was worn smooth. The battery cover was still held in place with the same strip of tape. I smiled before I even realized it. I turned it on and it worked perfectly, just like him. Simple, unassuming, and completely reliable. I typed in a number, 28 million. I looked at it for a few seconds. Then I pressed clear, because that number had never been the most important thing. What truly mattered was everything my father had shown me before he left this world. Patience, discipline, steady effort, and one truth I will never forget. Money doesn't solve every problem, but understanding how it works keeps others from controlling your life. That day, I understood the real meaning of his legacy. I didn't only inherit property, I inherited independence. No one would ever again decide where I was allowed to live. No one would ever again make me feel like a guest in my own story. As sunlight came through the window of my office, I finished my coffee and opened the first file of the day. Life was moving forward, and for the first time in years, it was moving exactly toward the place I had chosen for it. My name is Paige Irving, and this is the story my father wrote for me long before I ever understood why.